Hey everybody, I'm Jack Rita, and I'm the designer of Firefly Misbehavin from Gale Force 9. And this is a deck building card game set in the Firefly verse, where each player is a different faction in Firefly, like Serenity or the Alliance, Niska, or Eve's Down. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about Reavers. So there are Reaver cards that you can add to the market decks. Now the rules say don't use Reavers for the first time that you play the game. And in fact, you should get good at the game before you even think about adding Reavers, because they up the difficulty quite a bit. It's quite challenging to have Reavers in there. But you have a lot of flexibility in how you implement them and how big of a threat they can become, including cumulatively having multiple Reavers in different market decks. Now, the market is divided into 3 decks. You have core cards, border cards, and rim cards. And to start out with, you're going to want to take a couple of Reaver cards and shuffle them into one of those decks. And we recommend the rim because that's where the Reavers mostly hang out. But as you get better at Firefly Misbehavin, or you want to increase the challenge or the tension to the game, you can add more Reavers to any of the decks and Reavers to multiple decks, including saying maybe the Reavers have decided that they're going to start entering core space and really start causing trouble. So you could add them to any or all of those market decks. Now, how do the Reavers work? Well, first of all, there are 3 different types of Reaver cards, and it's easy to tell because of the numbers in the corner, but they also have different names and different images on there. So we're going to start with what is considered the weakest one, and that is the Reaver Menace. So what happens is these are going to be the market cards, and at the market deck, and at the end of your turn, you always replenish. And when you replenish, if you end up drawing this is going to be taking up one of the 2 slots of available cards. But it also means that everybody at the start of their turn will have to deal with the repercussions of the Reavers until they're gone. So the Reaver Menace, for example, says discard 2 random cards from your hand at the start of your turn. It also says no player can win the game. So somebody's going to have to deal with the Reavers in order for the game to end. But it also gives you an easy way, relatively easy way, to get rid of them. Defeat this card if you play a Crazy Ivan or Full Burn. Crazy Ivan or Full Burn, those are supply cards. Now, of course, they would need to be in the game, but you would know that if you are shuffling the Reaver Menace in. You can decide ahead of time if you're going to have Crazy Ivan and or Full Burn as supply sets in there, or you could do it randomly. I like to, if I'm going to have Reaver Menace in the game, I like to use the player-determined setup, and that is where players are going to draft the 4 supply sets that are added to the game. So remember, you always have shiny and you have the black, but the supply board has 4 more slots, one for any supply set that has the fight attribute, one that must have the deal attribute, one that must have the maneuver attribute, and then the 4th slot is for any of those. So you could have 2 maneuvers or 2 fights, 2 deal-making supply cards. And remember, some cards have multiple attributes, so that you could have even 3, for example. So you would know, hey, we're going to shuffle these in there, and then it's a matter of, does anybody draft Crazy Ivan or Full Burn, or do you just make it more difficult? Now, there's other ways to get rid of the Reaver cards, and that's going to be true across all 3 types of them, and it says right there at the bottom, 2 verse tokens per player or fight. Now, what does that mean? That means that on your turn, you can play verse tokens onto a Reaver card. Now, it's not each player has to spend 2 verse tokens. That's just the number of verse tokens. So in a 2-player game, it will take 4 verse tokens to get rid of the Reaver card, and they could all come from 1 player or from multiple players. So the more players you have playing, the more verse tokens it will take. And sometimes what will happen is in a 4-player game, 3 of the players are like, great, we each put in 2, and the 4th player's say, I'm not going to put in any, which means that everybody will have to keep dealing with the Reavers until they get more verse tokens on there in order to get rid of it. And then those verse tokens, of course, are spent. And then, of course, fight. So all of the Reaver cards have the number on there. That is the defense. And you just have to use your activation to pick a fight with the Reavers, and you just need to have 7 strength. So you would know that. Although there may be effects where you're like trying to draw more cards, or maybe you're spending verse tokens to get more cards, so maybe you don't know that, but you're hoping on it. If you get rid of it, it still counts as winning a fight, so you'd be able to gain a verse token, draw a card, or get a credit. But yeah, you don't get anything else. The Reaver card doesn't go into your hand. It just goes away. And it doesn't replenish that deck again until the end of your turn. So that is how the Reaver Menace works. So it's the easiest one to beat in a fight. It's the same number of verse tokens as any of the others. And it does have a little extra way that you can get rid of it. You can defeat the card just by getting, and it's, you don't get anything for defeating it by playing Crazy Ivan or Full Burn. You just get rid of the card. Now let's take a look at the next one up. That is the 8 strength Reaver card. It's called Reaver Threat. So this has different effects on the game. First of all, at the start of your turn, you get to discard a card from your tableau. Now you get to pick which one you discard. If you only have one, that's the one you have to discard. So it goes into your recycle pile. Then it says add 1 the black to your recycle pile at the end of your turn. So you would need to do that unless you got rid of this card before your turn ends. So that is an important distinction. You only do that if your turn ends and the Reaver Threat is still out there. And then finally, if you can't discard a card, select a card at random from your hand and then remove it from the game. So you would lose a card in your hand at random permanently. It's just out of the game. If you don't have anything in your tableau that you can discard. So the Reaver Threat is definitely more of a threat. And we had a game where somebody lost Malcolm Reynolds was removed from the game because the Reavers got him. So that is going to be a big deal. And again, you can get rid of it by having 8 power in a fight against them, or if there are 2 verse tokens per player in total played on that card. So it may take a few turns for you to be able to do that. So that's a big deal. And then it brings us to the last one. That is the 9 strength card, and this is the Reaver Raiding Party. So it says discard a card at random from your tableau at the start of your turn. So that's the same as the Reaver Threat. And it says if you can't discard a card, lose a card at random from your hand, remove from the game. So that is the same too. But what you also have is you may not gain from supply sets or any market cards from this deck. So that means you cannot pick up any supply cards. You can't get Shiny, you can't get Misbehave, you can't get Crazy Ivan, you cannot acquire any of those cards. And if this shows up in the Rim deck, there will, of course will be one more card. That means you can't get any, you can't use your recruit action to get any cards from that market. So if this is in the Rim deck, you can't get the other Rim card. If it's in the Border deck, you can't get a Border card. And again, 9 strength if you want to beat it, or still only 2 verse tokens per player. So now I talked about cumulative. Let's say that you've decided to shuffle a couple of these into the Rim deck, or you're shuffling them into multiple decks. So, and you've got the Reaver Menace has shown up in the Rim, and then you're replenishing somewhere else, and now you've got a Reaver Raiding Party. Well, you have to deal with both of these at the start of your turn. And yeah, if you've got the Reaver Threat and the Raiding Party, that means you're losing. You have to discard 2 cards from your tableau. Otherwise, 2 cards from your hand, or up to 2 cards, will be removed from the game. So that's why I said it really makes the game more challenging. But it can be very interesting, and it changes your tactics. If you know the Reavers in there, in those decks, you maybe try to acquire more fight cards, or you're trying to acquire more of your verse tokens early and stockpiling them and not spending them because you want to be able to use them to get rid of the Reavers when they do show up. Now, you shuffle them in there, they may never show up. You don't typically go through a lot of cards in a market in a typical game. So there are many cards. You may only see 4 cards in the Rim deck or in the Border deck. I had a game where we ended up not recruiting any cards from the Rim. It was all border and a little bit of core and mostly supply sets. So if we had shuffled all of the Reavers into that deck, none of them would have come up. And so the game includes quite a few. So you can really up the ante if you want by having a lot of those cards in there, but it's crazy. And we had one game where there were two, and it was getting close to the point where nobody could win, and it wasn't even we didn't even have the one that says nobody can win. It was just we were losing cards, and we were not able to gain the verse tokens. Nobody had enough fight. We did finally end up, getting just the right draw of, I think the Alliance, they had the Tohoku class cruiser, they had both Marines, and like, all right, I've got enough fight. I can take out these Reavers. And everyone else was quite happy that it happened, but it was very costly and really tough. So that is why the rule book says don't even think about using these until you are ready. But it can be very exciting, very tense, which I think is very thematic. Anytime the Reavers show up, or they're even thinking about the Reavers in Firefly, everybody gets really tense, and nobody is interested in having anything to do with them. So that is what they do in the game. If you've had a chance to play Firefly Misbehavin with Reavers, let me know what you thought of that. Did they come up? How troublesome was it for you? Were you able to get rid of them in one turn? That certainly is possible. Again, if you know that you've shuffled them in, you can prepare for them a little bit, but it's the mystery of not knowing when they're going to show up, if they even are going to show up. So you could be loaded for bear in a game where they just never appeared, but the threat was still there. And let me know if you're going to give these a try, if you've been playing Misbehavin and have not been brave enough to put them in there. Again, I would say for your first game, start with the Reaver Menace. They're just a menace. Then after you have actually dealt with them, then you can gauge when you're ready for the Reaver threat, and then finally the raiding party, because like I said, it's tense, and they are pain when they do come up, because it messes up all your plans. You're like, "Ooh, I'm so close to winning or doing whatever I'm trying to do at any particular moment," and now you have to stop everything, and you really have to focus on that, or you pay the consequences. So sometimes you can afford to. If you're like, "Oh, I've got a few cards out there. They don't have a very high power. I don't mind discarding one of those so that the other players are more punished." Maybe say, I'll put one verse token on there, but I'm going to make somebody else spend more, especially if they have a lot of verse tokens. You make Niska do it, because they always have a ton of verse tokens at their disposal. So there you have it. That's it for this one. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you again soon.